In today's video, we are taking a look at the 16-35mm F2.8 Gmaster version 2 versus the 11mm F1.8, the 15mm F1.4 and the 35mm F1.8 lenses on the Sony a7C II and the Sony a6700. This video is sponsored by us. Alyssa and I paid for everything and we're not sponsored by anyone. So a little help by subscribing to our channel, liking our videos and commenting on them is much appreciated. We have several videos related to cameras and lenses in this channel and we hope some of them will be useful for you, so please check them out as well. Before we get into the comparisons, here is how I made the sample pictures, which are available in the link in the description below. I made sure that the in-camera exposure metering shows 0 EV with multi-metering mode. The ISO is close to 100. White balance is set to auto, so you might as well ignore the differences in white balance. Photos were shot in uncompressed RAW in the a7C II, whereas the lossless compressed RAW in the a6700. Only in the widest apertures, I had to use silent shutter, and for the rest, mechanical shutter was used. No ND or other filters were used. The focus points are set to corners manually. The reasons why you might want to consider buying a Gmaster lens over the other lenses are the sharpness and micro contrast, flaring and ghosting performance, distortions, chromatic aberrations, size, weight, price, and usability. Mind you, this Gmaster lens is a zoom lens, whereas the other lenses we are comparing with are prime lenses. We pay such a premium for the prime quality in zoom lens. Let's just say that objectively, Gmaster lenses have better weather sealing and this lens in particular has 2 motors for autofocus. But I find the lenses we are testing with are really good autofocusing lenses except for the old 35mm f1.8 lens, which has just acceptable autofocus performance. Sharpness, especially corners to corners and micro contrast. Let's start from the sharpness comparison. As I have given you the samples from these lenses in every aperture stop, I want to pick up the f8 versions of each lens to compare, as according to the MFT charts, the lenses are the sharpest at f8. We know that the center sharpness of all these lenses at f8 are good, so I am going to focus on the corner sharpness only in this video. If you want to know the overall sharpness, you can compare from the given files. Since the 11mm is 16.5 full frame equivalent, I'm picking up the 16mm a7C II's image as the reference image at f8 and 11mm a6700's image as the active image at f8. The 11mm is clearly softer than the Gmaster image. Isn't it obvious given the price difference? But if you were to just have the image from the 11mm lens, it is not that bad at all. I would say with a little tweak in contrast, the image becomes better. For the price, 11mm lens is a fantastic option, but 16-35 at 16mm is much better. Now, since the 15mm on the a6700 is 22.5mm full frame equivalent, I have taken up the samples from the a7C II shot at 23mm with the Gmaster lens and comparing them. Even though 15mm f1.4 lens looks sharper than the 11mm f1.8 lens, it is not as sharp as the 16-35mm f2.8 Gmaster version 2 lens at 16mm. This is further evident when I compare both the G and Gmaster lenses on the a6700. The definition of the window curtains are better visible in the Gmaster lens. You can see with just a little bit of exposure increase, the difference is much apparent. But I would say the 15mm is not that far from the Gmaster lens, and for the price, it is an absolute winner. Even at f1.4, the sharpness from the 15mm lens at corners are fantastic. Comparing the 35mm f1.8 non-G or non-GM with the Gmaster at f8, they are very close. Where the Gmaster lens has an advantage is the micro contrast. The Gmaster image looks a tad bit more contrastier than the 35mm f1.8 lens. Comparing the Gmaster lens mounted on the a6700 at 23mm, it is performing the same indeed. Flaring and ghosting. I see that the flares are a big issue in all of these lenses, but in the Gmaster lens it's very well controlled. It's all close towards the center, and if you were to position your camera correctly, you will get away with the flares caused in the Gmaster lens. But in the other lenses, they have the sphere around the flares, which is very undesirable unless you reduce the exposure to a very low levels. But in my opinion, the Gmaster lens is performing really well in terms of flare control. Distortions. Regarding the distortions for the G Master lens, at 35mm the lens converges to the middle, at 23mm it has minimal distortion, and at 16mm it bulges in the middle. But if the lens profile is enabled, the image looks pretty good. Also, the in-camera corrections work really well for JPEGs. When it comes to the tiny lenses, the distortion is crazy when the lens profiles are turned off. 11mm image is almost spherical, 15mm is no better, and of course at 35mm there is no distortion. Comparing them to the 16mm, you see why you pay for the GM quality. Distortions are very well maintained. Vignetting is not an issue on any of these lenses. Chromatic aberrations. It is a pleasant surprise that the 11mm lens is free from chromatic aberrations even at f1.8 with really good close focus sharpness. That is not the case with the more expensive G lens, which has significant chromatic aberration at f1.4. This of course cleans up at f8 for all these lenses. G Master lenses do not have any sort of chromatic aberrations as well. Sharpness at the close focus distance is amazing in all these lenses, but I should say that the depth of field is a very thin sliver when the G Master lens is used at f2.8. So for close focus photography, I suggest shooting at f8. Size, weight, and usability. As you can see here, even if the individual lenses weigh about 200 grams each, the overall weight of 3 lenses come close to 700 grams. Instead of getting all these lenses separately, you can invest on the G Master lenses and you will end up paying just about $250 more for a lighter and really fantastic optical performer in most aspects. The second version of the 16-35mm G Master lens is really good. What about the other lenses then? You see, they are all primes, and where they deliver is giving wider apertures, especially during low light conditions for aps-c cameras. I have used the 11mm f1.8 lens for several travel vlogs on this channel. It is super pocketable and lightweight. It is perfect for wide-angle time-lapse too. Given the small filter thread at 55mm, I use a step-up ring to use 67mm ND filters to get amazing time-lapses. Just love this lens. The 15mm G lens is perfect for talking head videos for me. It is kind of wider than the 24mm lens and it delivers in speed, sharpness and excellent bokeh. It does what the 11mm lens does and better except for the chromatic aberrations. Even though it is like 22mm full frame equivalent and not 20 or 16mm, I think it is sufficiently wide for most applications. The 35mm lens is what I'm using for B-roll shots. It is such a value for money lens. With its f1.8 aperture, if I want to travel light with the a7C II, the 35mm lens is what I take. The biggest drawback of this lens is the chromatic aberrations, but apart from that, I think it is a very good performer as well. The bottom line is that when you want a prime level or more than prime level performance in a single lens instead of 3 lenses with different focal lengths, that's when you need to consider the G Master lens. For situations where you can't change lenses, G Master lens will handle the job of 15mm, 24mm and 35mm lenses. On the other hand, I don't even know why I'm comparing full frame lenses with the aps-c lenses, maybe just curiosity. But there's one more thing. Since I have 2 bodies, I have all 4 of these lenses and depending on the situation, I will choose which one to use. Anyway, that's it for the video. Please like, share, comment, subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay tuned for more such videos. Peace.